Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Jackie,
I'm Ethan.
and welcome to Plan Well to Live Well. Today's show, we're going to be speaking with Henry Yampolsky. Henry is an author, two-time TED Talk presenter, a yogi, a mediator, conflict resolution, and an attorney. Henry, welcome to our show.
Henry, welcome to our show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's so wonderful to see you and to be part of this program.
Thank you so much. So Henry, we're going to have you today in two of our segments, in our Plan Well segment and as well in our Live segment. So we're going to show our guests and our viewers a little bit about that. All right. So that's a little intro for you and for our viewers. So thanks again, Henry, for joining us. We have a lot to talk about. As you know, as we mentioned, all of your successes and all of your activities. I can't believe how you have time for the show today. So Jackie, tell us a little bit how Henry is your guest, and tell us a little bit about your relationship with Henry, and Henry will ask you some questions so you can help our viewers and educate our viewers, and we'll try to keep this fun for everybody.
So Henry and I met from a business perspective that turned into a personal perspective. The more you talk, and the more you find that you have common ground. We love our motorcycling. We had attended his yoga classes at his home. That turned into he knew I was on a personal journey for personal development, and then next thing I know, I was on a plane with Henry to India for 15 days. So it's amazing.
When I heard about that, I was like, "Oh my God, where are you taking her?"
So I'm laughing about it, but my laughter is of just joy of the experience of just being with Henry, and he was able to pull some things out of me that I didn't even know that I had within me, Ethan. So it's just amazing how we just evolve as people. So when you say Henry has all these activities, he has evolved too. So it's just nice to be a part of the journey from a business perspective, from a friendship perspective, and just helping me to be a better person. So
I'll share with the guests. We talked with Henry a little bit off before we got on. I thought he was still local here in Pennsylvania, and just last week I found out he hasn't even been here for many years. Or so Henry, tell us a little bit about your journey. At least we could start your journey from Pennsylvania over to Virginia, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So let me begin with my current role and current place. I'm very fortunate to be working at Virginia Tech, where I serve in the Office for Equity and Accessibility, the University Civil Rights Office. And I direct our internal conflict resolution, conflict coaching, mediation, restorative justice programs. I also am very fortunate to be teaching here. I teach in the Center for Peace Studies and Violence Prevention. I teach conflict resolution, mediation, and peace building. And, mountains have played a really big role in my life. I've been fortunate enough to be in the Himalayas, as Jackie has alluded to. And now I'm very, very fortunate, consider myself very, very fortunate to be in the Blue Ridge Mountains, one of the most beautiful regions of the country. So I really enjoy Philadelphia area and miss and still come by and yes, and still have many friends. But now my home is here in the mountains of Southwest Virginia.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. Henry, we thought that you would be a great guest for us. Jackie thought that you would be a great guest for us. And part of our Plan Well segment, which, Jackie and I are advisors, and we advise on insurance, retirement. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, just the word insurance or retirement or investments, it's a pretty broad categories. But I also met you some years ago as well, and to find out that you're involved in mediation, conflict mediation,
Mhm.
and what was interesting for me, I said, "Well, hey, there's financial planning in conflict mediation." I'm like, "What do you mean? What is financial planning in conflict mediation?" So, for me, that was kind of an interesting topic, and I'd like to explore that a little bit more. I know Jackie has, some questions for you, for our
Mhm.
viewers and for our guests. Jackie, what some of the questions you want to ask Henry
Well, as I
for the plan
started
for the
the
plan
plan
segment?
segment. For
Yeah.
the plan segment, when I was doing a little bit of research and I was taking a step back, I was like, wow, money or financials play a huge role in our everyday lives, whether it be a married couple, whether it be a small business owner or business owners, entrepreneurs. So as I was thinking about that, I was like, wow, oftentimes we agree to disagree, or how do we appropriate the funds? So I was able to pull some questions together just to talk about that. So if I'm in a conflict situation, whether it be the boardroom or the bedroom, can you demonstrate a technique that can be used to dissolve a situation before things get out of hand?
Mm. So there are a couple things. There are a couple things here, Jackie. The first part of the situation, the first technique, really, is quite broad, and that is actually the importance of having these conversations. I was working with a couple some years back, and they came to see me. They were about to buy a house, and they were about to make a kind of a major life investment. And actually, it was one of their relatives who heard about mediation and kind of invited them to come and speak with me. And like most people, they actually, when I started speaking with them and listening to them, I discovered that, like most people, they never actually talked about money. They never actually talked about the major differences. They weren't even aware of the major differences that they had in terms of how they approached money. So the first invitation, we tend to live in a culture where we like to avoid these conversations. We like to avoid the discomfort that these conversations bring. And my invitation is we need to change that, right? These are critical conversations to have. Um, these are critical conversations to explore, to consider. And so we're doing immense disservice to ourselves if we don't engage in these conversations, if we don't talk about whether it's money, whether it's sex, whether it's whatever other difficult issues that may be arising in any sort of relationship, whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's a business relationship, even asking questions like, so what happens if things don't work out, right? What happens if no one wants to think about that, right? No one wants to think about that until they're forced to. And then very often that's too late. And that's very often when the relationship is broken. And that's very often where it becomes even more difficult to have the conversation. So my first invitation is for your viewers, for your listeners, to get comfortable with the discomfort of having these types of conversations. These are absolutely critical conversations. And as I said, if we don't have them voluntarily, right, kind of on our own time, very often life will force us to have these conversations and to do these considerations. And when that happens, that typically is in situations when there is a lot of stress, a lot of tension, and that's where things become very, very challenging and very difficult.
So if I could just jump in. So, you know, you're an attorney. You're a mediator,
Mhm.
and so part of your, when you do conflict resolution, at least let's just say personally with couples, like Jackie said, in the boardroom or in the bedroom. But is it like, would you say that part of your role is like say marriage counselor as well, or on a personal level, and maybe like in the business level, you're doing more like business agreements or business arrangements
Oh.
so that people don't have to go to court? I mean, is that kind of the idea of having these conversations, say with you or with, people in this particular sector?
So I would say yes and. So my role is to create space for people to have whatever conversation they want to have. I'm actually not in the business of telling people what they should do. My job is not to solve their problems or even to see them as problems. My job is to empower them to have a meaningful dialogue with each other so then that they can arrive at whatever solutions work for them. Now, sometimes, to arrive at those solutions, I may give them relevant information, right? Or invite them to speak to folks like you who may present the information to them. But ultimately, this is about creating space for people to have whatever conversation they want to have. So, a lot of what I do in my work, and actually, majority of probably the number one skill and tool that I use in my work is I listen. I listen. Most of the time that I spend with people, and this is whether, a lot of my work now involves complex organizational conflicts, civil rights disputes, uh, issues where we have structures and organizations that are trying to deal with change and are trying to reform and maybe become better at what they do. Ultimately, it's no different than working with a couple or working with a small business. I do a lot of listening. And then the second thing I do is I ask questions. And part of my job very often is to ask questions that are uncomfortable, that people have not really thought about or have thought about in a way that is very superficial. And so sometimes in my job, it is to probe a little bit and say, okay, well, what do you actually mean by that? Tell me more. Tell me more. What is it that you actually mean by this? What is it? Sometimes it astonishes me, when you ask someone kind of in the ideal world, what would you like to happen? Or in the ideal world, what would you like your life to look like, in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is? And these are, I suspect, similar questions to what you ask many of the folks you're working with.
Yeah, we call that fact finding. In our professional world, we call that fact finding. And when we able to determine the facts, because products and services anybody can buy, but choosing the right product and the right service for your ideal, you got to do through asking questions, right?
Sure.
So so a lot of that resonates with what we do and what you do as well. So that's great information.
Yeah, and even to add something to that, I'm very often astonished by when you ask this question. So in an ideal world, where would you like to be in 5 years or 10 years, or kind of how? I'm very often astonished by kind of how vague people's answers are, right? Or how very often their answers are not based necessarily on what is important for them or what they want, but what they think they should want, right? What they think they should want, something that they've seen on TV or something that they've seen on a brochure. But then when you probe some more and you say, well, why is this important for you? Is this something that you've been doing? Very often the answer is no. So a lot of my work is actually helping people to expand their understanding. And expanding understanding means that we move from, and this has to do in all levels of conflict, whether we're dealing with civil rights issues, whether we're dealing with organizational conflicts, whether we're dealing with interpersonal conflicts. And that is really expanding from very positional approach to questions into life, right? Very kind of superficial. And most of our discourse, most of our conversations, most of our questions are on this very superficial positional level. Going from positions to interests, going from interests to emotions, and emotions are very, very important in our work. This is not just a nuisance to deal with. This is critical for us to hear those emotions, to engage with them, to understand them. We go from there to values. really, truly, what is important for us in life. What do we want this very short time that we're here for to stand for? And finally, and most importantly, we go to needs. We go to needs. And in my experience of working with many, many complex conflicts around the world, actually, our basic human needs are the same. And these needs include the need for security, the need for autonomy, the need for authenticity, the need for connection, the need for peace, the need for meaning, and the need for expansion. Now, the strategies to meet those needs may be very, very different. And that's where, you can explore sort of the individual differences. But ultimately, it's about discovering and identifying these needs and then empowering people to develop strategies that work for them, because what may work for you may not work for me or may not work for Jackie. So then empowering them to develop the strategies to meet those needs, and truly, making sure that these are their needs, not the needs that they think they should have, because this is what they saw on TV or on YouTube or anywhere else.
And it's funny you should say that, Henry, because the more, in preparation for our conversation today, the more I took a step back and said, what kind of, as an advisor, what kind of questions am I asking? And one of the things, my takeaways from you was, am I being inclusive? Am I being compassionate? How am I communicating? How am I coming across to answer a person's specific needs and their questions so I can advise them on the right needs uh, based on the conversation that I'm having with the person that I'm advising before I can present a product or service to them. It's good that you point out those 6 things, because it's making me be introspective in how I address future clients going forward.
And can I add something to that, Jackie, if I may? Very often when talking about conflict, I'm actually not as interested in talking about conflict resolution as I am interested in talking about conflict transformation,
Okay.
right? Because conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict is not a bad thing. What we want to do is transform it from something that is destructive to something that is constructive, to something that becomes the engine for change, for innovation. But when talking about conflict, I very often talk about 4 principles of conflict transformation. And these are very relevant to the work that I do. And I suspect to some of the questions maybe that your listeners are asking. And also, I suspect to the work that you do. And the 4 principles of conflict transformation are: first, tuning inward. Now, tuning inward is where we do talk about mindfulness. A very Western idea of mindfulness, however, is we do mindfulness to feel better. I think it is critical for us to start doing mindfulness to actually get better at feeling. And this is critical. This is a critical difference. Because actually, we need to become more sensitive to life, more sensitive to life, more sensitive to all dimensions of life. And Jackie, to coming back to your point of being more inclusive in our work, inclusion begins with us being willing to meet people where they are, not where we are, but to meet people where they are. And in fact, we all know the golden rule, right? Treat others the way you would like to be treated. I think a modification to that is treat others the way they would like to be treated, right? This means we have to engage with people. This means we have to actually listen to them, what is important to them. And it may be very different than what is important to me, what is important to you. But if we are to be effective in this, it is about meeting them where they are. The second principle of conflict transformation is observation without evaluation. So much of what we do, and actually, if we tune into our language and the language we use, much of our language is very evaluative. Just about everything we say is a judgment, label, evaluation, or conclusion. And if we are to engage with people, if we are engaged with conflict, if we are to transform conflict, we need to shift to an observation. What is actually this person doing? We don't need to diagnose them. We don't need to label them. What is it that they're doing that maybe is concerning to us? And this is critical in the way that we give feedback. Also, part of observation without evaluation, probably the purest form of that, is listening, active listening. Now, active listening is in so many ways a cliche, right? Everyone says practice active listening. Very few people actually know how to do that. Very few people actually know how to do it. It's a very physical process. It's also a very, very intentional process where we actually remove as much of ourselves as possible. We don't try to problem solve as we're listening. We're just holding space for another being. Third aspect is what I talked about already, third principle of conflict transformation, and that is expansion. And that is where we move from positions to and through interests, to and through emotions, to and through values, to needs. And each of these is very important. Each of these, it's peeling the layers of the onion to see what is really there. And actually, most people do not know what their needs are until they're given space and room to actually discover. The final aspect of conflict transformation is exploration. Exploration. Now, this is where we engage with curiosity. We have courage to be curious in conflict, which is very difficult. And also, this is where we move from binary positions to engaging with complexity, nuance, and ambiguity, inherent actually in every human interaction. It is something that is even inherent to every major issue that we face. We face as people, we face as humanity, we face as a society. Even if we take the most polarizing issues, right? Pro-life, pro-choice, gun rights, gun control, blue, red, white, black, even behind these seemingly binary slogans, there is immense complexity, ambiguity, nuance, uncertainty, and we need to engage with that. And we need to engage with that. So much of my work, and when people ask me, so what is it like to be a mediator? I will say to people, the biggest aspect of my job is I have to sit with ambiguity. All the time, I have to be with ambiguity and be very comfortable with ambiguity. And that is very uncomfortable for most people. Most people want a very clear, very certain answer. And that's not how life works, right? Every moment there's many dimensions, there's many ambiguities, there's many complexities and many nuances, and we need to engage with that.
I'll tell you real quick. One time I sat on a seminar, and the word ambiguity, to me, I sat on a seminar a long time ago, business, it's like, I think, some type of business development seminar. And I don't remember anything in the seminar except what the speaker said was, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of believe that because you just don't know what the other person is thinking, your business partner is thinking, what anybody's thinking, because it's kind of unknown to everybody. And that when you go into any relationship, business or personal, you have a lot of that unknown that you just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So I think that kind of goes hand in hand. And Jackie, do you have any other good questions for Henry, so some of our viewers could learn a little bit more about some of the things that Henry does when it comes to the Plan Well segment that we have?
I would say, let me see, what was my biggest converse as a business partner, even us as colleagues in planning for today's segment, we really had to go from within and say, okay, what things that we want to pull out either from each other,
Mm-hmm.
from what we wanted to present to our studio audience, and then what questions that we wanted to ask you, Henry. So I would say just to Ethan's point, to your point, understanding each other. That so I would. My next really big question is life plans, because we as advisors or presenters, we're constantly believe it or not, if we're sitting with someone and we're presenting, we're
Mhm.
also thinking in our minds, okay, what solution, what product, what
Mhm.
service can I provide to solve Mr. or Mrs. Jones's current situation that's going to propel them from today till down the road till tomorrow.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to hear your spin, like being a place of ambiguity. If we shouldn't be judging or planning or thinking, but we almost have to.
Mhm.
I guess that's more of a statement, Ethan,
Yeah,
versus
a
a
question.
question,
Well, I have a question
an
for Henry.
observation question. So.
Well, I have a question for Henry. Kind of when we started our segment was, what intrigued me about this particular conversation we're having is, I would like for you to explain to us and to our guests is, how does financial planning come into your space as you're dealing with, say, business conflict resolution and personal conflict resolution on a financial purpose? Can
Mhm.
you explain a little bit about that?
Well, sure. So this is one of the important questions, right? Then that we ask. So first of all, in conflict resolution, and Ethan, I would like to go back to something that you said because I think this is really critical, and I want to weave this into the answer. The fact that we don't know, and in fact, very often, in speaking about not knowing, I very rarely talk about empathy, right? And this is unusual for someone in my field and kind of my approach, but I think empathy is an illusion because this idea that we can ever be in another person's shoes is an illusion. I can never be in your shoes because I don't have the exact experiences that you had, right? So I like to invite all the
I'm going to remember
professionals.
that statement, Henry. That one, that's going to go right up there with the I don't know what I don't know. That's going to go right up there. Wow, that's an
Good, good, well, good.
interesting point.
Good. So, where I would like to focus is on compassion. Where I would like to focus is on compassion. What is compassion? So, compassion is intimate, infinite connection with another person's humanity. What does that mean? It means that even though I may not know their exact pain, I've experienced pain, I've experienced anxiety. And so, being connected and aware of that, but also combined with the knowledge that I can never truly know or experience what someone has lived through. Even if we live through the exact same experience, my experience of that experience can be very different from yours. Which brings me then to your question, Ethan, right? Because if we begin and really ingrain this idea that we don't know, how do we get to financial issues in mediation and conflict resolution? We ask questions, right? The question that I use the most, and this is also where I think it's critical for us as helping professionals make all of our practices trauma informed, right? We also don't know what traumas people are carrying, what intergenerational traumas they're carrying. So, how do we get to that? How do we start getting to the bottom of that? We ask questions. One of the most important questions I ask is, tell me more. Tell me more. And then I listen very, very carefully. I also ask a question. Tell me what is important for you, right? Tell me what is important for you. Tell me why this is important. And I think getting to the why question, right? Why is something important? So I think so often when you talk to people who are maybe trying to, whether people going through divorce or people going through business restructuring or people going through, any sort of life change, they very often get stuck in a position, right? They very often will get stuck in a position, and the position may be, I need $1 million. I need to get $1 million out of this process. Let's just say, for example. So you never ask them the question. A lot of people don't ask the question, why do you need $1 million? So let's say you have the $1 million today. What will you do? Right? So very often when you ask that question, right, people will say, well, this is what I need for security, to be secure. So then I will ask another question. Tell me what security means to you, right? because for some it's not necessarily that it's a million, just having $1 million in the bank, right? What does it get to you? Whether it gets you a place to live, whether it gets you, an opportunity to do the things that are meaningful for you. So to me, the way we get to the financial issues, the way we talk about financial issues, is constantly asking the question, why? Why? So what will happen if you have this? And then very often people will also come in, and this is very common, when people are in fear, when people are in conflict. This happens a lot in divorce. Where people will come in with an idea, this is what they need to get. And this is very positional statement. And I am trying to get to the need behind that, right? And then what I invite people to do and to see is to actually explore different strategies, right, for meeting that need. So let's say if the need is, I want to have a comfortable place for my child, for my child and me to live, and for the child to be able to go to college. Okay. So there's a lot of exploration we need to do there, right? What makes a place comfortable to live? Does it have to be 3,000 square foot? Does it have to be in a particular location? Does it have to be close to something else? Is it more of an idea, right? In terms of sending a child to college, does it have to be Harvard? Could it be so with so many of these things, people will make these very vague statements and they will attach a position to that. So I want to be secure, therefore I need $1 million. And my job is to kind of go beyond that, right? And to say, well, tell me more about what security actually means to you, right? Does security necessarily mean that you have to live in a house that is this big? Could it be a house that is this big, but maybe has certain features, right? Other ways that you would get security. Could security also mean that maybe you get money for your education so that you don't have to depend on someone else to provide that house? Would that make you feel more secure? So it is constantly peeling the onions, and this is where these issues come up, a lot. Of course, and especially in my prior roles when I was doing a lot of more private practice work, in divorce, this is constant, right? Financial issues, where how will it work financially? How, how we can barely kind of afford to live in one house. How can we now make it work with now having two households, right, and two rents or two mortgages? It happens a lot, in end of life planning, and this is one other area that people really are very uncomfortable, right, to talking about. I was working before, with a family who was trying, siblings, adult siblings, and they were trying to come up with a care plan, for their ailing mother. And this was some very difficult conversations that we needed to have. Now, of course, there were financial aspects, in terms of, what care they could afford, but also there were a lot of considerations about what was really important for them, and even about their relationship with each other, prior relationship with each other, and their relationship with their mother. And so, my approach, and maybe to further answer your question, in these situations, I deal with people first. I deal with needs, with emotions first, and then from there we go to money, right? So first, I want to understand really why. I want to understand this person. I want to understand what makes them tick. I want to understand what is truly important for them and why. Why is it so important, right? Then once I understand, then we can talk about, okay, so what is it actually going to take? And then part of my job is to say, well, wait a second. Is there actually, so your need is security. Let's say you want to feel secure. Is security only about having $1 million in the bank? Or are there other things that are part of that? Are there other things that are part of that? And if there are, what do they mean? And how do we get there?
Now, some of those other things, Jackie. Um,
Oh yeah, as an advisor, we deal with that all the time. Having that difficult conversation if someone we're approaching a client and they're interested in getting life insurance, and what does that look like? What kind of
Mhm.
estate planning have they done? Is it budget friendly? So oftentimes, I'm just thinking back to some past clients that I've had. I'm thinking that although I thought I was doing active listening, maybe I focused in on the wrong thing first.
Mhm.
For example, they may say that they need life insurance, but I'm so focused in on the budget versus asking the question of truly what their needs are. What is their intention,
Mhm.
long term and short term? And then if I'm meeting with a family, like in the case where you're doing some life planning for someone, when we're presenting short term care and long term care, what does that look like emotionally, in addition to what does it look like financially? And so I know Ethan, um, that's one of his areas of expertise is the short term, long term care presentation. But
Mhm.
now, taking a step back and looking more introspectively, I'm wondering do I focus in on what things should I prioritize when I'm asking the question of the
Mhm.
why?
Mhm.
So I need to reprioritize my line of questionings to better understand, to present, to address their need. So you definitely made me think about a
yeah.
lot of different things that I could do differently as an advisor when
Mhm.
presenting different products, life insurance, short-term care,
Mhm.
long-term care.
As we wrap up our plan segment, Henry, I do want to just ask you if we'd definitely like to have you back on our show, but I do want you to just go into a little bit of detail and let me know in a let's say relationship or in a personal type of conflict resolution. How does someone's retirement account or life insurance play a role as they're going through conflict resolution? That's the field that we're in, and we're dealing with that, and we want our listeners to know, well, what happens to their IRA or to their life insurance that they've planned for themselves or for someone else in their life, but yet they're going through this conflict resolution. How does that exactly work?
Mhm. So, couple things here. One of the most common conflicts that we see now is actually gray divorce. What is a gray divorce? Is people in their 50s, 60s, sometimes 70s, right, who decide to split up. And actually, this is very interesting because people look forward to retirement. They can't wait till the day they retire. Sometimes they have a very vague idea as to what actually will happen, right? They kind of get their idea. Sometimes it's kind of their idea of retirement is the idea from their 13-year-old self. They'll sit home all day and they'll eat ice cream for breakfast and they'll go play golf. Well, they do that for a week and then it gets old, right? And then all of a sudden they realize that this person they're living with, who maybe they spent 40 years of their life, it's actually the person that they don't feel as connected to anymore because maybe they identified so much with their work, maybe they identified as being a parent, and now the kids kind of are out of the nest, and the work is no longer there. And this is very often where people go through that life stage of, wait a second, I don't know this person, and now that I'm spending all day with them and I have nowhere to go, it's not as fun as I thought it would be, right? And this is where a lot of these questions come up of, uh, you know, wait a second, if people are splitting up, well, what happens to the pension, right? What happens to the 401k? This is what I kind of was counting on having in my kind of my nest egg, right? Counting on having in my retirement.
Yeah.
Now, right? If I'm splitting up, how will this work? What will this happen? Should this person, are they entitled to get any portion of it? Now, I'm not going to get into actual, kind of legal financial advice piece of it, because there could be different considerations there in terms of, where someone is entitled to pension or not, or 401k. And that's not where my expertise necessarily is.
Yeah, my question was more about how are you dealing with more like on an emotional and just an understanding level, because I think many people just don't understand, like you said, hey, I had this thing and now I got to split it. I think a lot of people don't understand that that is the next step into that conversation.
And how do we deal with conflict is, again, getting to the needs. So what is it that you need, right? You need security. You need what is important for you in your life, and what does it actually mean, right? And why? So we keep coming back to that why question, right? So it may be that I want to be secure. Now I no longer have a job. I have fixed income. I want to be secure. What does security mean? Tell me more. What does security mean to you? Is security attached to square footage? Is security attached to a number? Is security attached more to a general sense that I am able to do certain things, right? And if certain things are important to you, what would it take, right? What would it take for you to do them? Now, actually, a lot of things that are truly important for us, and when people say security, actually, a lot of things that are truly important to us are relationships, right? Are things that actually cost no money. So a lot of people make this assumption, and this happens a lot in divorce and in other settings where I live with a child. The child is used to living in a certain standard, and therefore I must maintain that standard. And the question becomes why?
Yeah.
Right? Why? Does it mean that if if the child lives in 1,000 square foot home, that their experience necessarily is going to be worse than a child who lives in a 3,500 square foot home? And the answer is not necessarily, right? It's not about um, money very often. It is about attention. It is about, so again and again, we come back to needs. We come back to asking the question, why?
Good information, and we thank you for that. So we do have the next segment, which is the lift portion. We wanted to talk a little bit more about you, the other side of Henry, and yes, we will have you back on our show, Henry, and we'll talk about the lift portion. But before we go, I know you want to talk a little bit about what you have going on with you personally, your book, your tours. You want to speak a little bit about that before we go?
Well, sure. A lot of the ideas that you heard, are part of this book that came out last May. I'm happy to say that it became a bestseller, and it's Dissolving Conflict from Within, an Inner Path for Conflict Transformation. And this is really about how it's really not just about conflict. It's really about how we can live a life that is filled with meaning, that is filled with purpose, where we are connected, truly connected with each other on a very powerful and profound level. And, Jackie traveled to India with me a few years back. And this was really even the purpose of that trip, and that experience for us to go within, for us to ask some very powerful questions, and actually maybe sometimes not know the answer, but experience the profound beauty and expansion in that. And sometimes not knowing the answer, not being so focused on the answers, but being more focused on the questions we ask, and then letting our life, the life we lead, become an answer to those questions.
Your viewers to know, and we'll definitely bring you back to the show. I want your viewers to know where they can go get your book. Is your book available on your website, or is it your book?
Yes, yes. So actually, it's available everywhere books are sold. Certainly through my website, which I see you have up, and of course also some site named after a river. I heard it's there. There is an audio version, there is an e-version. All are available, and also at your local Barnes and Noble or wherever wherever someone may shop for books. Something else just wanted to add, and very often, I am on LinkedIn, I am on Facebook, Instagram. Mostly I'm active on LinkedIn, and this is where I will post, my speaking schedule, engagement schedule. So if folks want to connect with me in person, I do travel quite a bit around the world.
Thank you very much for your time, Henry.
Henry, oh my gosh.
Jackie, thank you for inviting Henry to be our guest today.
It's so good to see you, Henry. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your wisdom. And thank you for enriching us, Ethan and I, today, so that way we can be better advisors and just better overall folks as we serve our community, our clients, and our families. Thank you again, Henry.
Well, it's so wonderful to connect with both of you and to spend some time together. And I look forward to seeing you both in person sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Peace and love to you, Henry. Have a good new year. We hope to have you back on our show soon.
Take care.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. So hope you enjoyed this information. We think Henry's great. And Jackie, thank you again for having him on our show. A lot of information. We didn't really get a chance to get to Henry, to the other side of Henry, him being a yogi and all of the holistic and the things that he does. But we will definitely bring back Henry to our show. Hopefully our viewers enjoyed him, and we will eventually have our chats up. But you do have our channel. You can go, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And please go and find our YouTube channel, Plan Well to Live Well. Click on the calendar link in the description, book a free complimentary consultation. And as well, you can go to our channel and post any questions or any comments or anything you may want to see on our show when it comes to Plan Well. Plan well is a big word. It can mean differently, as you heard our guests say, that it means things mean different for other people. You have to active listen. And so Plan Well can mean something different to you. And we'd be more than happy to discuss that on our show. Just send in your comments, okay? Jackie, you want to say a couple of words before we end the show?
I'm going to ask more questions as to why and be a better active listener. So I just want everyone, thank you again for your time and your attention. Most importantly, Ethan and I want to say, you have to plan well in order to live well.
Thank you very much. And if you want to be a featured guest on our show, or you're a sponsor or an advertiser, also please go to our YouTube channel, Plan Well to Live Well. Click on the calendar link and schedule a meeting. And we thank everybody for being here today. And everybody take care. See you next week.